It was 2002 when my parents bought my brother and I a Nintendo GameCube. That was a good while after we were jealous of our friends for having one, and console rentals not really scratching that Nintendo itch for us. Aside from staples like Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, and then recently released Super Mario Sunshine, one game I was enamored with is now, almost 20 years later, one of the first third-party titles I recommend for the Cube. Lost Kingdoms is a mix between an action game, a card battler, and an RPG. You collect cards of power to control monsters or guardian creatures, and use them to summon, help, or attack foes on small battlefields as you negotiate a variety of short levels. You play as Princess Katia of Alonja, whose father has left to find the cause of the Black Fog, which has encroached on the 5 kingdoms of this world. An ancient pact prevents the 5 kingdoms from working together, but this black mist has left the kingdoms with no choice but to meet. But none of them have a solution. With the fog devouring everything it covers and any who step into it never returning, the stage is set for a grand adventure to stop an ancient evil. Princess Katia is no warrior, but in the Kingdom of Alonja's treasury is the rune stone and a small deck of old cards. These cards become her weapons, and with them she can fight the monsters emerging from the Black Fog and save the world. The cards feature impressive artwork, and for a game that I feel is largely overlooked, Lost Kingdoms has a melancholy charm in its art and design that I really like. Some of the best art is sadly hidden in the strategy guide for the game's Japanese release or relegated to loading screens, but I still love the early GameCube style look, even if it is a bit under what some other titles were doing at the time. The story of Lost Kingdoms is, I admit, rather thin, but it doesn't take long to complete, and it pulls you along at the right pace to still be interesting. In Katia's plight to find allies for her adventure from these 5 kingdoms that have remained largely separated for years, she uncovers a plot centered around each kingdom's magical runestone. Lost Kingdoms is segmented into different levels, and while some toss a few puzzles at you to open paths forward, progression is mostly linear. You'll travel through forests, deserts, ruins, and other environs, but the game does a decent job of presenting a landscape truly benighted by this bleak fog. The look of the game I mentioned is a little below what other titles may have been doing at the time, and I think that's especially true with this background in battles, which is a real distracting mess. But the tone of everything in Lost Kingdoms matches a bleak yet pleasant soundtrack as well. At the end of each level, you're ranked on your performance, how many monsters you fought, how much damage you suffered, and how many cards you used all factor into a rating between 1 and 5 stars. A higher rating allows you to choose more bonus cards, with some harder to earn ones possible in some levels. While you cannot replay levels until the end of the game, there are plenty of ways to find and earn cards other than this game of chance, but it's still a fun challenge to get through each level as efficiently as possible. Now let's circle back and talk about Katia's offensive capabilities in battle. The threat of random encounters is present in each level, but don't compare Lost Kingdoms to a game like Baten Kaitos, another card battler RPG series on the GameCube. Princess Katia's deck of many things is a little bit more active than that. As a battle begins, you'll draw 4 cards from your deck. In the default control scheme, you use a card by tapping the corresponding button. Using a card expends your magic power, which you can replenish by finding magic stones dropped by monsters when struck, or by destroying some obstacles in battle. Each card has a limited charge, with several only working once before being discarded. When out of magic power, using cards consumes Katia's health, and with limited uses per card and a small deck of them that you can bring with you into each level, strategy and efficiency is the key to victory. There are 3 types of cards in Lost Kingdoms, and a healthy mix of them is essential in each deck. First, there's weapon cards, which can make a strike from your position, such as like a sword or a beam attack. These cards typically can be used several times before being discarded. Then there's independent cards, which bring creatures to the battlefield to attack your foes for you. Some go right for enemy monsters, while some have certain patterns, and others even act as decoys to distract monsters from attacking Katia. These cards are discarded once their energy runs out. And finally, summon cards call a single-use monster for a large effect. This is usually either a healing move or similar effect, or a large area attack. These can be difficult to use thanks to a big wind-up for the attack, and even making sure that Katia is facing the correct direction when you tap the button. Each card also belongs to one of 4 elements, with each having a strength and weakness to another. A very small amount of rare cards and monsters are neutral, without any advantages or disadvantages to other cards. As you fight, players have to make the most of that limited number of cards you can bring with you. You can run away from a battle, but you'll lose a card for the rest of the level at random from Katia's deck in doing so. And while the fights are largely random, they're not too frequent to be annoying or unfair, which is good because you'll want to explore the level's nooks and crannies to find more magic stones and especially extra cards. Enemies telegraph their attacks a decent amount, and with clever use of independent monsters or smart placement and timing of your attacks, you can easily overcome your foes. but the battlefields can sometimes feel cramped and messy to me. A large part of this, in my view, is Lost Kingdom's camera, and while you can zoom and rotate it a little, it's kind of stuck on certain axes. It's difficult in some scenarios to see an enemy on the other side of the field to line up and attack. Katia is often, for me, too close to the center of the screen. Battles are still fun, don't get me wrong. I like the ability to toss a card a little further so I can put it in a different position than right in front of me, and those kinds of things are a nice touch, but I really would have liked a camera angle more level with Katia's point of view. Deck building is where you can have a lot of fun in Lost Kingdoms. You can create several decks as a sort of loadout to choose from, but each deck can only hold a maximum of 30 cards. Each level shows you the expected elements of the monsters you can expect to find, so you can build a deck to meet that scenario, or else you'll find yourself spamming attacks and wasting cards. Cards used and discarded in battle are not returned to you during the level unless a card allows them to be recycled and restored, so you'll want to make liberal use of the deck points in each level that restore health and allow you to add any cards you've discovered in that level temporarily to your deck. While I think the discarded and used cards vanishing from the deck is annoying, the game does throw cards at you every level to help you maintain your combat ability, and your deck is reset at the end of each level. I don't care for the fact that it is possible to become totally helpless by running out of cards, but thankfully there are several remedies to prevent Lost Kingdoms from becoming a game of attrition warfare that isn't in the player's favor. You can also purchase cards from Gerd, a strange old hag that teaches Katia about the runestone and her magic cards of power. Gerd can also help you copy cards you own and transform them into more powerful cards by burning experience points. This is one system in Lost Kingdoms I really don't care much for. Cards earn a lot of experience if they are used in battle to finish a monster off. But all cards in your deck also gain experience points when you collect magic stones, although not that much. The grind to transform some monsters can take a while, but the fruits of those labors pay off in the form of some very powerful cards. You can also sacrifice a card in your hand to perform a capture throw on a near-death monster, allowing you to turn that creature into a new card that you can add to your deck. I mentioned that each level is pretty straightforward. There's a handful of mixed paths and different side quests Gerd may hint for you to complete, and the game also features 4 secret levels toward the end of the adventure that can be easy to overlook. Early in the game, you'll meet fairy-crazed Alexander, who will give you cards as you bring him more red fairy friends. The fairies are apparently born from the slivers of hearts that break off when one forgets to love, which is both wild and out there, but also oddly fitting for the tone of this game. Red fairies can be difficult to find, but they all have cute little messages that help flesh out the world a little bit when you discover them. Some are hidden, but thankfully, or annoyingly, anything you can interact with in this game gets a nice alert above Katia's head. There's also blue fairies that spawn randomly on the map, and they can restore health, bestow magic stones, or even recycle a used card for you. They can be a little hard to catch, but they are definitely worth running down. Bosses are tough in the game, especially when you encounter someone with a runestone like yours, but if you've played the levels smartly and stack your decks well, they are more or less just big monsters and play by the same rules as normal fights. Beating the game is also the only way to replay levels, which I really don't care for because it makes it difficult to earn experience for your cards, and that's going to make you feel like you're getting stuck, at least I did for a while. It also prevents you from finding those secret levels if you accidentally go past the point where you can access them before finishing the game. I honestly think that's one of my biggest gripes with Lost Kingdoms, because why have a map level select screen if my only options are to go do a handful of side quests or just move on to the next level? Lost Kingdoms is by no means a plot-heavy game, and I think that's in its favor. Katia's journey across the 5 kingdoms isn't too lengthy, and collecting all 105 cards is hardly necessary in order to reach the ending. While the art style may be off-putting for some and certainly not the game's strong suit in terms of graphical fidelity, I love the tone and feeling of the world, and I've always felt that Princess Katia's design had a welcome elegance and regal charm. She's got a quiet, determined look that fits well with the setting of the game, despite her role as a silent protagonist. If you like the battle system and want to have a little extra fun, you can find a friend in a surprisingly good 2-player battle mode. You can even load separate save data for each player and bet a card as a prize for the contest. This is a fun way to share cards between save files with a little bit of a gamble involved. And I think it's fun to put strategy against another person in this unique combat system instead of just the computer, and it can be a lot of fun in a group of friends. I really do have a soft spot for Lost Kingdoms as one of my formative GameCube experiences. I appreciate its unique take on monster collecting for combat, the dreary tone of the game, the fast-paced action in battles, and levels that never drag on too long. It all sits well for me, and I think it's a sadly overlooked title in the Cube's library. Thankfully, Lost Kingdoms isn't a one-off for FromSoftware, and most issues I have with the execution of the first game are addressed in Lost Kingdoms 2. In a sea of standout first-party GameCube games, it's sometimes easy to forget about strong third-party titles, and I think you'll find Lost Kingdoms a worthy addition to any GameCube collection.